In Theon Greyjoy's 6th chapter of A Dance with Dragons, we're placed in the midst of the worst blizzard the North has seen in decades. Endless, ceaseless, merciless, the snow had fallen day and night. But the snow couldn't hide the bodies of 4 murdered men who died one after the other over the course of a couple days. Roose Bolton and his lords must deal with this mysterious killer within their walls, potentially an agent of King Stannis Baratheon, who marches his army through the snow towards Winterfell. The first body was a 44-year-old man-at-arms belonging to House Riswell. He was found outside in the snow at the base of a wall, his neck broken. Roger Riswell declared him a drunk, who must have slipped while trying to piss off the wall. Theon wondered why any man would climb the treacherous steps in the freezing black of night just to relieve his bladder. The next morning, Aenys Frey's own squire was found dead. He was stripped naked in the lichyard, his face frozen over from the cold. Aenys, like Roger Riswell, supposed the man was a drunk who got lost in the storm. But why had he taken off his clothes to go outside? That same evening, a crossbowman belonging to House Flint was found dead in the stables, his skull shattered. Ramsay Bolton declared he was kicked by a horse. He must have been if he was found in the stables. But Theon decided it must have been a club, not a horse. The final death was Ramsay's own sycophant, Yellow Dick. He was found dead outside the kitchens, buried in a snowdrift, with his own penis stuffed into his mouth so forcefully it had broken his teeth. Clearly, the person responsible for these brutal murders is no fan of Roose Bolton's regime. But who could it be? Theon found it impossible to fall asleep, so most nights he took to wandering around Winterfell. After all 4 bodies had been found, Theon comes across a mysterious man wearing a hood. "Theon Turncloak," the man said. "Theon Kinslayer. I'm not. I was Ironborn. False is all you were. How is it you still breathe?" "The gods are not done with me," Theon answered. "Lord Ramsay is not done with me." The hooded man laughed and said, "I leave you to him then." Theon wonders if this could be the killer, but he doesn't recognize the man despite coming face to face and their eyes briefly meeting. Maybe we shouldn't read into that too heavily, as Theon has spent months being tortured by Ramsay and wasn't all that great at remembering faces to begin with. He didn't recognize his own sister Asha on Pike, and began incestuously touching her breasts while riding horseback. He didn't recognize Hother Umber or Arnulf Karstark at the Dreadfort either. He realizes both are lords, but you'd think Theon would recall their faces from their visits to Winterfell. So this hooded man could really be anyone, someone Theon knows, or someone he's never met. Well, it can't be anyone truly. There are a couple of criteria. First, the hooded man recognized Theon instantly, despite his disheveled appearance as Reek. So it has to be someone who either knew Theon or was around him enough to recognize his face as Reek. Second, the hooded man knows that Theon betrayed the Starks, but didn't know Theon survived Ramsay's sack of Winterfell. He calls Theon false and is surprised he still breathes. All this is not to say that this hooded man is for sure the culprit of all these Winterfell murders. There are other suspects, who I'll cover briefly, but I think it must be the hooded man, or else his inclusion in the chapter is just random. This way it's a mystery for the reader, and George loves those. It's more fun. The 2 most obvious suspects are Wyman Manderly's knights, or Abel, aka Mance Rayder's washerwomen, who are really spearwives come down with him from the north. Barbie Dustin thinks the murders were not the work of a knight, and that instead of Lord Manderly, who Aenys Frey has a personal grudge against, any lord of the north has equal claim to these murders, as it wasn't only the Manderlys who lost kin at the Red Wedding. And I agree with Barbary. Wyman Manderly is certainly anti-Bolton, but these small murders are beneath him. His eyes are set on a larger prize, recovering Rickon Stark, helping Stannis overthrow Roose Bolton, and installing Rickon as Lord of Winterfell, potentially with Wyman himself as Lord Regent. Abel's washerwomen, such as Holly and Rowan, vehemently deny committing these murders, and on the same grounds as the Manderlys, I agree. It would be too obvious, and Abel/Mance already has a scheme going on. These murders mean nothing to his end goal, which is to save Arya, or at least Ramsay's wife, who they think is Arya, but who Theon knows is really Jane Poole. I won't be surprised if Mance's women are responsible for these murders, as a method of turning Bolton's lords against each other, but I really think the Hooded Man did it. A common theory is that Robert Glover is the Hooded Man. Robert and his older brother, Lord Galbert, both go south to fight the Lannisters with Robb, and both are actually still alive. Before the Red Wedding, Robb sent Galbert and Mage Mormont to Howland Reed in the Neck, and while we never get confirmation they made it there, we wouldn't have, since we don't have a POV character nearby. And Robert was taken prisoner after his failed attempt to capture Duskendale. But Robb traded Martin Lannister for him, and Robert sailed back north. He stays with Wyman Manderly in White Harbor, since the Ironborn took Deepwood Motte, as well as his wife and children, hostage. Deepwood Motte was given back to the Glovers by King Stannis, so it would make sense for Robert to cross the north westwards and be with his family. And perhaps he made a pit stop in Winterfell to see what he could find out about the Boltons, and cause a little ruckus while murdering 4 people. It's not totally implausible that Robert is the Hooded Man, except for the fact that the Hooded Man is surprised that Theon is still alive. In a Davos chapter from Book 5, Robert informs him that Ramsay Bolton took Theon back to the Dreadfort and he's been flaying him. So he knows Theon is still alive, and wouldn't react the way the Hooded Man reacted. Assuming the Hooded Man is responsible for these murders, rather than Manderly's Knights or Mance's Spearwives, and assuming Robert Glover and other popular theories I've linked below are not the identity of the Hooded Man, my first theory is Hallis Mollen, Winterfell's captain of the guards who went south with King Robb. In Book 3, Catelyn told Hallis to escort Ned Stark's bones to Winterfell and let him be interred next to his family. A few Silent Sisters and a few soldiers went with him, and then Hallis disappears from the story. He could have drowned in the swamps and been eaten by lizard lions. He could have hopped on a boat and ran away to E.T. Or maybe he succeeded. My theory is that Hallis Mollen took his party north all the way to Greywater Watch, where Howland Reed helped him sneak past the Ironborn at Moat Cailin so that Hallis could covertly infiltrate Winterfell. Can Hallis be the Hooded Man? A running motif in Theon's A Dance with Dragons chapters is his phrase, "There are ghosts in Winterfell, and I am one of them." He thinks the ghosts are speaking to him in the Godswood, so when he comes upon the Hooded Man, I think Theon mistakes him for a ghost. Theon doesn't hesitate to pull off his glove to show the Hooded Man how Ramsay tortured his hand. But a few paragraphs later, Barbary Dustin tells Theon to remove his gloves, and he begs her not to. Barbary is real. She's flesh and blood. The Hooded Man is a ghost to Theon. Maybe subconsciously, Theon thinks he's a ghost because he assumes Hallis is dead. He would have died in the south with Robb, in battle, or at the Red Wedding. In addition to these 4 murders, maybe Hallis Mollen killed little Walder Frey as well, in Theon's final chapter of Book 5. His cousin Big Walder found the body, butchered like a hog and shoved beneath a snowbank beneath the First Keep, the oldest section of Winterfell where Bran once found Jaime shagging his sister. Big Walder has Little Walder's blood all over his gloves, which is explainable by him being the one who found the body. However, it's certainly possible that Big Walder killed his own cousin to advance himself forward in the Frey line of succession. Little Walder's body was found frozen, so how did Big Walder have blood all over his gloves? Big Walder killing his cousin is very possible and maybe even probable, but it's also plausible that Hallis Mollen did it. Big Walder says that Little Walder was trying to find a man who owed him silver from a game of dice. He says it was a Manderly soldier, which is probably just because he wants to put the blame on Wyman, who House Frey is beefing with. Now, lots of soldiers played dice. It's not exactly a unique coincidence that we're told Hallis Mollen plays dice in Book 2, but it's a piece of evidence for the pile. Hal Mollen lured little Walder to his own doom with a game of dice. There's also the way Hallis Mollen talks. He has a tendency for stating the obvious, like when they come across a melee between King Renly's men. Attorney Hal Mollen declared he had a penchant for loudly announcing the obvious. Earlier, when he was guarding Catelyn at the Whispering Wood, Catelyn thinks the army is coming, whereas Hal says it out loud. And after Robb captures Jaime and throws him to the ground, we read, "The Kingslayer," Hal announced, unnecessarily. This reminds me of the Hooded Man, who calls out Theon the same way, stating the obvious. They've already come face to face, their eyes have already met, and yet the Hooded Man says his name 2 times. Theon Turncloak, Theon Kinslayer. And then there's the matter of Ned Stark's bones and the Winterfell crypts. When Bran, Rickon, Hodor, and all those guys leave the crypts, the door is barred by some stones, which Hodor pushes out of the way. It doesn't say Hodor replaced all the stones after they walked through, and why would he? But when Barbary Dustin is trying to access the crypts in Book 5, the door is frozen shut and blocked by rubble, suggesting someone put all those stones back. We do know that at least 24 people were squatting in Winterfell after Ramsay burned it and before Roose moved in. But given how Barbary was having her men search every nook and cranny of Winterfell for the entrance to the crypts, I highly doubt any of these squatters were down there and responsible for covering the entrance with stones. You know who does have a reason for going down there? Hallis Mollen, who is taking Ned Stark's bones to lay for eternity next to his family. It's entirely possible that Hallis sneaked into Winterfell sometime at the beginning of Book 5, and has already put Ned's bones in the crypts. And he sealed the entrance with stones so that the Boltons couldn't do any shenanigans down there to all the Stark history. In Book 5, when Barbary Dustin tells Theon she plans to intercept Ned's bones because she hates him, that was George laying the groundwork for this subplot, and Hallis Mollen to re-enter the story. And if Hallis separated from his fellow soldiers and the Septas who went with him, and transferred Ned's bones into as small of a box as possible, he could have slipped past Barbary Dustin's scouts with ease. Or, I also like the idea of Hallis reaching Howland Reed at Greywater Watch and leaving Ned's bones, along with the Septas and maybe the men who came with him, with Howland, while he went ahead to scout the situation at Winterfell. But Hallis saw an opportunity to cause mayhem between the Freys and Boltons by doing all these murders as the Hooded Man, thus weakening Roose Bolton. We could still see Howland deliver Ned's bones to fulfill Hallis Mollen's task, and I think this would be more narratively significant. It gives a logical reason for Howland to enter the story, and George Martin has confirmed he will enter at some point. And it's fitting that one of Ned's closest friends should be the one who brings his remains back home. So for these reasons, maybe the Hooded Man is Hallis Mollen. My other Hooded Man theory is a lot more tinfoil, but I like it. Harrion Karstark matches the necessary criteria to be the Hooded Man. He's been in the South this whole time, so he would be surprised that Theon was still alive, just like the Hooded Man is surprised. Harrion, being amidst Robb's army in the Riverlands, would know about Theon's betrayal, but wouldn't know what happened to him afterwards. Harrion became a prisoner at Maidenpool after failing to take Duskendale, and even though we never read anything about him leaving prison, why would we? And even though the Book 5 appendix still lists him as a prisoner, of course it would, or else it'd be a spoiler, there is still a way for Harrion to be in the North. In Book 4, Jaime Lannister tells Edwin Frey that the crown needs all of House Frey's prisoners. This implies that Great John Umber, a captive at the Twins, will be moved through the Riverlands and potentially rescued by the Brotherhood Without Banners. In fact, this might have already happened in Dance, or will happen off-page. I wonder if Jaime gave the same order to William Mouton, that the crown needs all of Maidenpool's prisoners as well. Why would they just want the prisoners from the Twins? Harrion could have gotten himself free and traveled to Winterfell in the several months between A Feast for Crows Jaime 6, when we learn the crown wants its prisoners, and A Dance with Dragons, A Ghost in Winterfell, when all the murders happen and Theon meets the Hooded Man. I admit there are problems here. If Harrion escaped, why would he go to Winterfell instead of home to Karhold? Well, we know that Karhold is lightly held by a small garrison, and Harrion's great-uncle Arnulf and Arnulf's son Cregan have gotten themselves taken prisoner by Stannis and Jon, respectively. The Karstark army is with Stannis, just outside Winterfell, so perhaps Harrion wishes to take command of his own men and help oust the Boltons. For the moment, he's doing what he can inside Winterfell by murdering these 4 people and sowing dissent between Bolton's bannermen. It's also possible that Harrion made it to White Harbor on his way to Karhold, never intending to go to Winterfell. He could have taken a boat across the Bight and met with Wyman Manderly. Wyman then enlisted Harrion Karstark as the Hooded Man. They're working together, just like Robert Glover was working with Wyman in White Harbor. My third and final Hooded Man theory is that the Hooded Man didn't do anything. He could still be Hallis Mollen or Harrion Karstark, or maybe even Benjen, or a figment of Theon's own imagination, like many theories suggest. But all 5 of these murders do have much simpler explanations, which are less fun. That's why this section is last. 2 deaths, the Riswell man with a broken neck at the base of a wall, and then the Flint man with a broken skull inside the stables, might be nothing more than meets the eye. It seems Roger Riswell knew the man was a drunk, and it's not that hard to believe that he just slipped while trying to piss off the wall. And we know the stables were overcrowded because of the blizzard, so it's not hard to believe the Flint man really did just take a nasty kick to the head from an anxious, claustrophobic horse. And while Holly and Rowan, Mance's spearwives, vehemently deny killing little Walder, this passage sort of seems like they admit to previous murders. Namely, the Frey Squire and Ramsay's sycophant, Yellow Dick. Both the Squire and the Dick were found naked. Or at least the Squire was naked. We just know that Dick's dick was stuffed in his mouth, but they might have left his clothes on. Holly denies being involved in any of the murders in the A Ghost in Winterfell chapter, but in Theon's next chapter, Rowan specifically denies killing little Walder. She doesn't want to be called a child murderer, I guess. In that passage, Theon says, "You killed the others, why not him? Yellow Dick." And Rowan interrupts to say, Yellow Dick stank as bad as Theon does. But she doesn't deny killing him. She just goes on to again deny killing little Walder. That's because, as I mentioned earlier, little Walder's death is easily explainable if we accept Big Walder as the murderer. Big Walder had blood all over himself, but little Walder's body was frozen. He must have gotten his cousin's blood on his clothes while murdering him. The idea here is that Mance's spearwives capitalize on the death of the Riswell man by killing the Frey Squire. And then after the Flint man gets his head kicked in by a horse, the spearwives kill Yellow Dick. Big Walder murdering Little Walder makes 5, and Winterfell is swirling with paranoia, trying to blame each other for these murders. So when Theon and the spearwives rescue Jane, the castle guards have their guard down. They are preoccupied with not getting murdered like the rest, and with the coming battle against King Stannis. Let me know down in the comments who you think the Hooded Man is, and give me your theories about all these murders in Winterfell. Thanks for watching and subscribing.